Okay, it is 6:30. I am going to call the meeting to order. TJ, will you please call for the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Good evening. Welcome to the April 28th Board of Education meeting for Worthington City Schools. I'm Kelly Davis. I am this year's board president. To my left is board member Nikki Hudson, board vice president Amber Epling Skinner, our treasurer TJ Cusick. To my right, Superintendent Dr. Trent Bowers, board member Stephanie Harless, and board member Jennifer Best. If you're able, please stand for and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. May I please have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or corrections? All right. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
motion carries. Next item on our agenda is visitor comments. As Vicki prepares us with the names of the individuals who will be making comment this evening, I will read something briefly. The school board and administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitor's podium so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard. The speaker should give their name and street address and limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Consistent to our policy 9130 on public complaints, we ask that complaints about particular employee, a particular employee be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during public session. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all of our students and community members. We want to remind our community that we value public input and always appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language, or for sharing your comments, and for sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. It is not our usual practice to respond to remarks during the visitor comments section of our meeting. We have Okay. Our next agenda item is Representative Anita Samani. So I see Anna here. Okay. We'll pivot. That's fine. No worries at all. Nathan, are you ready? Okay, now we're going to pivot just a little and have a presentation given by Nathan Kellenberger, our Coordinator of Behavioral Support and Mental Health Services. We're ready for you, Nathan.
Thank you. Good evening, President Davis, Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Bowers, Treasurer Mr. Cusick. Thank you for having me here this evening, the opportunity to speak about my new position as the Coordinator of Behavior Support and Mental Health Services. Really excited to be here for this opportunity to share our work as a team. I'm here by myself tonight, but, yep, sounds like no. Good. So I'll lean in. So I'm here on my own this evening. Better, thank you. Though I'm here alone this evening, this is absolutely a team effort. Nothing happens here without collaboration and support from AEPL, building principals, families, our whole team. So completely excited to have this opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity. So first and foremost, it's not hooking. There it is. All right. There we go. So this summer this whole year has been really a learning experience for me. It's been about building a foundation, really getting to know our team, getting to know what our buildings are in need of and our families need, and giving the most support that we possibly could. So I spent the summer really just talking to our team and meeting folks and learning more about their roles in this, and building principals, academic achievement, professional learning folks as well, just to kind of learn as much as I possibly could. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is our team. So who makes up this group of mental health support, behavior support folks? What is a foundational point that we need to be at as a district when we talk about behavior support? So for us, that's going to be our positive behavioral intervention support programming and support for teachers along those lines. I'm going to speak a little bit about a collaboration we had with our Worthington Education Association and that impact on our crisis response program in our district, in our buildings. And then last but not least, I'm going to talk about a fantastic opportunity that came up to support families. As we know, we're not alone in this, and we need to partner with our families and provide as much support with and partnering with them in our community as well, and to support the work that we're doing. So behavior is a very complicated fact. Those of you who have kids, you know that already. So excited to share that work. So first and foremost, our team. So I get a chance every day to work with our board certified behavior analysts, BCBAs, our mental health specialists, our school counselors, directions for youth and family services, our school nurses and health office assistants. But as I said, that's not just our team. Our academic achievement, professional learning folks are a huge part of that for us. Also get the opportunity to work with our building principals. And then also a big thank you to Angie, our assistant superintendent, Angie Adrian, introduced me to a peer in Westerville who does very similar work. So that gave me an opportunity to be on a consortium with those in Central Ohio doing much of this work. So we meet monthly and kind of process, ask questions, and work with each other. So I did kind of jump ahead a little bit. I just wanted to mention, you've heard from Special Education Director Kim Marani recently on the special education audit, and of course Angie on her portrait to practice piece. So my position arose from that special education audit. So I'm very thankful to both of them, and I wouldn't be here without their support. So that goes without saying, but I said it. So first and foremost, our team. So the first thing we did was we worked together as a team of mental health specialists, counselors, to put together a visual for our principals and for our buildings to really understand what the roles consist of. So when you look at this chart, what's important to note is that left to right is much more general in nature, and then those supports become more specific as you go to the right. So as I said, our school counselors are members of our team, incredibly important to what we do. School counselors are more of a general support for our kids. They're able to meet with students about peer relationships, might be some school support, working towards graduation, those pieces. But then as you work to the right up there, each of the next steps on this group require parent consent and provide more intensive support for our students. So as you go over to the right, first you have our mental health specialists, and they work with students with more specific needs, anxiety, depression, trauma, more clinical in nature, so more of the one-on-one support there. Our BCBAs, board certified behavior analysts, those folks work primarily with behavior, so trying to identify maybe why certain things are happening and how we might be able to strategize and support those students in the classroom and support their families with some strategies as well. And then further to the right, you have our directions for youth and families. They're not Worthington employees, but we partner with them to support our students with even more support. We collaborate with them, and the big difference there is that they're able to oftentimes go into the home and do home counseling for our students, and so work with the families too. So we shared that with our principals, and then the buildings talked through much of that, but then the next piece became the foundation of our work. So it's when you talk about behavior and mental health, you have to have somewhere to start. And so you have to have a groundwork, a framework to go on. And so the consistency of what we call tier one. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about our MTSS process, or multi-tiered systems of support process in Worthington. And so when we talk about tier one, we talk about those pieces that are at the bottom. That's available to all of our students. Those are supports for all students, access to all students. But then as you go up that pyramid, those supports become more intensive. So tier two becomes small group support. Your tier three, becomes more one-to-one support. So when you think of that in a math classroom, for example, your math curriculum is your tier one. So that's what every student has access to. But then if students might be struggling in math and you go to tier two, that might be small group. So we'd be working in the classroom with small groups. But then if we go up to the tier three level, then we're getting one-to-one supports. So this year has been about building that foundation for behavior, the the tier one level for behavior. And so for Worthington schools, our focus has been on positive behavior intervention supports. That is our tier one support. That's what every student should be getting access to in our buildings. And the support of the consistency that goes with that tier one support at PBIS. So that's where we began. But as I get into that, I'll start talking about the work with the PBIS. So I had the opportunity to work with our Director of Elementary Education, Rob Messenheimer, on our PBIS programming, and quickly realized that this is absolutely something that needs to be stretched across all of our schools, so pre-K-12. So then our Secondary Director of Education, Emily Greenwald, had to get involved with us too and be a part of the work that we were doing. So in a nutshell, the backbone of PBIS is that every building has a set of expectations, rules, thoughts of the building core and the classroom core. So what are our expectations? And then we directly teach those to our students. So we show students what we expect. We don't expect, we teach first. And then, from there, we recognize when those positive behaviors are occurring, and we work with students where we might need to offer a little bit more support. So it's the basis of just figuring out what it is that we want to focus on and how do we get our kids there and not expect that they know everything that we want them to do when they come to us. So that's the basis of our PBIS program, but that's not the only part of our tier one that we've been working on. So the first thing that happened for us was we started a PBIS district committee. And so that committee consisted of principals, counselors, mental health specialists. Our BCBAs were a part of that group. Members of our AAPL department were a part of that as well. And so we spent a good part of our year meeting to find out what it is our buildings need. How can we provide support, auditing what's happening in our buildings? And so from there, we were able to generate a 3-year plan for our buildings. That consisted of the first steps in that process. We're trying to help coach our buildings to ensure that there are proper meetings happening for their PBIS committees within their buildings. We are able to offer tier one support for our teachers that outline exactly what expectations look like for our teachers in their classrooms. And so how that should look for them. We were able to work on a reflective tool that the state of Ohio provides us. It's called the Targeted Fidelity Inventory. It's a TFI. So buildings can reflect on their PBIS practices and kind of build a goal from there and then grow their program. So it's pre and a post. Ultimately, our goal is that our buildings will apply to be recognized through the state of Ohio. There's a bronze, silver, and a gold recognition that goes with PBIS through the state of Ohio. Our goal it's wonderful to be recognized. Of course, that's a goal. But to get recognized, to go through that process, you have to be doing really well. You have to have strong PBIS programming and supports in your buildings. So we wouldn't apply if we weren't able to get there. So that's where we were with PBIS. But this work has just started. So from there, it continued with trying to find additional supports for our teachers at a tier one level. So how can we help classrooms? So I've kind of tried to pull out some of the bigger pieces of that work so far this year, and some of those tier one resources I've kind of listed up here for you. So I'll go through them in turn. I spoke to the PBIS piece in our tier one checklist for teachers. I was able to work with our Director of Academic Achievement, Kelly Wegley, and her coaching staff, her coaches, to work on our executive functioning skills. So how do we teach kids how to be organized, how to get started on tasks, how to work in groups and things like that. So the important part, as I said earlier, is Tier 1 is teaching what you expect, showing what you expect. So that was a big part of the start. So we were able to do when school started, our principals did professional learning around this topic. Voting day, we did the same. I was able to present with Angie at KMS, so we broke out and did some of our own pieces on that. And so that work continues, and Kelly continues that work throughout our school year. And of course, I partner with our coaches, district coaches, because our work aligns so often. I mean, behavior and mental health go hand in hand. Oftentimes, behavior is a communication. So if we can have that sound, strong basis, then we can try to help our kids in process and build those relationships. So that leads to our next Tier 1 support that has existed, but we're working on building that up. That is our responsive classroom curriculum that we have in our elementary schools right now. Responsive classroom focuses on building a community, positive relationships, interactive modeling. There's morning meetings that are associated with that as well. And so we've looked at professional learning opportunities this summer, myself and Rob and Kelly, to grow that programming into our secondary schools as well. So that's a push that we're having. Next up, we have the piece I want to share. It's called the PAX Good Behavior Game. So I've learned a lot of things this year. I've kind of gotten involved in some pieces. And the PAX Good Behavior Game is a research-based, fun, kind of interactive game style of building and setting up classroom expectations. So what's really cool, or what's interesting about the PAX Good Behavior Game, is that it's supported by Nationwide Children's Hospital. So we have that partnership where they'll be able to coach and work with us. They provide training for us for that. So I've been trained in this in our 2 BCBAs, and we've got grade bands right now at the elementary that are excited to have us come in and work with the grade band in that PAX game. And there's more opportunities along those lines that have come up. So next, our next steps, excuse me, as I said, we're growing the Tier 1. That's not going to ever stop. My hope is to build a bank of resources to work with our team, not me, our team, to build a bank of resources to support our teachers in the classroom, and also to grow out our Tier 2 and our Tier 3 supports for students behaviorally. Rob and I have been working on that a little bit this week, as a matter of fact. Then the next two pieces are pieces that have started this year, but will be implemented next year. And so that will be a reflection on our crisis intervention programming, and then also something we're working with our families on. So I'll go into the next steps. I wanted to bring up partnership with our Worthington Education Association. President Brian Morgan approached Dr. Bowers in the spring about collaborating on behavior supports at the elementary level. And so, as we do, that formed a committee, which is the collaborative nature of the work that we do. And so myself, Angie, and Rob now are in a committee with our WA representatives, and Brian, and then some of his folks in that group, and just looking at some ways we could collaboratively strategize around behavior and supporting our kids. And so one big piece that jumped off for us was to look at our crisis response programming that we use. We have used something called the Crisis Prevention Institute since approximately 2013. Every school in the state of Ohio must have a staff-trained and research-based curriculum for crisis. And so our concern has been that maybe could we find an option that might be a little more preventative for our kids, that might be educational for our staff, to try to provide support as opposed to reaction when something happens. We found that sometimes with CPI, a lot of times it might be a reaction. So how do we help? Marcus has been a really strong resource for that. In looking into that programming, they formed out of the Marcus Autism Center. So they worked with students with autism that needed additional support for behavior, and they were not finding the resources they needed to support their students. So they developed this program, and from there it's really grown in Central Ohio. So I've looked at and spoken with some other local school districts that are using the Marcus program, and they're incredibly satisfied with that for a resource for themselves. But the key to Marcus is really like the MTSS model. It gets more specific as you go up on the model for the support levels. And so at the level 2 part of Marcus is really about education for our teachers. So our hope is to build our team out to be able to go to buildings and support our teachers with recognizing students when they're in a tough place, whether it be a trauma concern or they're experiencing some difficulties. And so recognizing and seeing those signs and providing earlier support before a student might become frustrated and not get that support, and it might lead to something else. So that's, I think, going to be a really big help for us, and also a Tier 1 support, because all of our schools will hear that message and get that support. So we have a transition team that's currently working on that piece moving forward, and we're going to fold in those courses over the summer. But we'll still keep our CPI because we can't do it all at once. So we're still going to have some of that folded in, but I think it'll be great for our students and our staff. Excuse me. And then last but not least, I just wanted to speak about the fact that we don't do this alone. We work well with our families and our communities, and our families need resources as well and support. And so we spent some time at the beginning of the school year looking into options for our families and found a strong program called the Positive Parenting Program, Triple P. And so Triple P, again, has a continuum of support with more support to more, or general support to really specific support. So at the highest level, it's really one-on-one support for families. We decided to go with basically in the middle. It's called Level 3 Triple P, and 18 of us were trained in that. So mental health specialists, counselors, building principals, our parent mentor were trained in that program. And we're really excited about that because we get to offer 2-hour sessions on any of these 5 topics you see here. So dealing with disobedience, managing fighting and aggression, hassle-free bedtimes, meal times, shopping. So we'll be able to offer families these classes or these courses at their avail. And so we're trying to put that piece together now as well. And we actually have a planning meeting on Wednesday to support that work. So really excited about the opportunity to partner with families and give resources. You know, we reach out and we try to make those connections, but now to have something tangible like this, I think will be really exciting. And I think that the people that I've trained with are really excited. And purposefully, we're working with folks in our team that have had conversations with families about things and providing support already. So they'll be able to help us get with families that might need some additional support as well. I think that's a big piece of this. So what I did here was I just wanted, you have it in your packets, but I wanted you to see each of these pieces I've spoken on this evening a little bit. I think it's really important that the work we do is pre-K-12 so we can catch all of our students. You'll notice there are 2 here that we're growing out that way, and that was the Triple P is really the elementary level right now, but we want to grow that secondary, and there's an option to do that. Also, the responsive classroom, and we're also growing that piece out. And I, having worked in middle school, know the responsive classroom can connect with our middle school students. I also think it's really important to connect what we're working on with behavior and with the mental health support side of things. So I won't read all of these to you, but you can see that it's really hard to separate the two. And so helping students, like I said, behavior is communication, and trying to find supports and create really strong relationships and loving environments, care about our kids, partner with our families and our community is essential to our success in either area for what we're doing. So last but not least, just to, again, thank you. And hopefully you hear the collaboration that happens here in the department, and this does not happen in a vacuum. And so I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to making it grow and working to continue that growth and supporting our kids. So leave it now for questions.
Nathan, you did amazing.
Thanks. Thank you.
This has been great information. I got a little sneak peek a couple weeks ago, and so I'm so excited to hear finally get to hear your presentation. Is any questions for Nathan or comments? Tell him how amazing he was.
Well, we've gotten a little bit of a sneak peek too at CLC and AAPL, and we've talked, but I will say it again, the extent to which you have expanded your role since you have been here is amazing. And also, like there's so much collaboration going on across the district, and that's really, really hard. And it like looks really pretty from the surface, but I know how hard that is. And so I'm really impressed, and we're making the most out of all the efforts that we're doing. And I am genuinely appreciative of that. And I want to point out to the positive parenting. You said you had 18 teachers. What you didn't say is that a lot of them got trained this year. And it says a lot about the teachers that we have. It says a lot about you. It says a lot about the program, that they're willing to do more and learn a new curriculum in the not free time that they have. So thank you for that. And doing something in the community, right? We're taking the school outside of the school walls. We're partnering with parents. Like that's the efficacy of that is so high. So I will stop saying things, and I do have a couple questions. My first question was, did you say, and I might have misheard you, that the Marcus Crisis Prevention is taking the place of CBI at some point? Okay.
Yes, we'll transition.
Okay.
It'll take a little bit of time for that.
Okay. And then when you were, the table that you showed with the different levels of school support was really helpful for me to kind of understand how that was scaffolded. Can you just talk a little bit about, on the first 3 columns that we control, not the outside, what that staffing looks like and how many are available per school or split across schools or
The
whatever.
original.
The not that one,
Yep, I know which one. Our, so
Yep,
we
that
have,
one.
there you go. We have 27 school counselors. We have 11 mental health specialists, 2 BCBAs, and Directions for Youth. We currently have 3 Directions for Youth folks working with us. So,
Okay.
but we're always investigating options and actually meeting with their board next week to talk through some ideas.
Okay. I was just curious kind of how that scaled down. And this is my last question, I think. You talked about PBIS and every building or buildings developing their set of expectations, which is awesome. Do the individual schools have autonomy within to develop their own, or is that kind of spread? Okay.
Absolutely, yes. And
That's
our
awesome.
buildings are doing fantastic work with PBIS. We've been doing PBIS since 2012. So now it's just getting refocused on that work and growing it. Now there's been changes and some updates that can happen with that. So
Okay. Thank you again.
thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I will add to that, a lot of the PBIS work that's being done in buildings is also connected to Portrait of a Learner.
Yes.
So I like how it's all just woven together. So I just want to make that point. Anyone else?
I can
Okay.
go ahead and go. Just, of course, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And I think I just love the way you've taken this role and run with it and expanded it and collaborating with everyone. So we really, really appreciate that. The Triple P, did you have a parent session this school year at all? Have you had one yet?
We did 2 of they're called Fearless. So they're at the middle school level and they're more of a group effort. So it's an all-day 8-hour seminar. We have 2 of our mental health specialists trained in the higher level, the upper level. And so we'll grow that out, but that was about anxiety. So that was for middle school families on anxiety. So we did 2 of those. And we've dabbled at our, at Liberty a little bit, but not to the extent of having the training put in. So we partnered a little bit with another organization to get some things done.
I mean, I think the parents will love that resource.
And we're hoping to have them going quickly. We just got our materials last week. That's what we needed to get started on things. So
Okay.
it'll
That
get going.
sounds great. Thank you. That's it for me.
I was going to ask about that too, because I don't know if I missed it in the newsletter or anything, but how is that being promoted, the positive parenting
So
sessions?
we're going to be doing the meeting. We have a planning meeting on May 1st here. And so that's part of our communication piece is how we get
Okay.
those pieces out. We couldn't do much with it because we had to all get certified. So it involved, and you say a commitment, it was 3.5 days worth of getting support, not full days all the time, but like half day for their accreditation and things like that. So once that was done, we had to make sure we got all of our supplies set up for the buildings.
But you envision that being open to the public and
Yes.
promoted to all parents across the district
Yes.
when you're up and running? That's good. Along with that, being new to this position, looking at this situation with fresh eyes and bringing in kind of a new perspective on this issue. I mean, what are some of your main top lines? Like, what are some of the things that if you had to describe just sort of the scope of this work, the moment we're in right now, and sort of what success looks like in your position, how would you articulate that?
So that's a really tough question.
Sorry.
How would I articulate? For me, it's about like when you go into our elementary schools and you see all of our schools really, but when you see some of these things in action, like our PBIS plan that's in action, and when it's connected, like you said, to the Portrait of a Learner, the way in our elementary learner profile, middle school learner profile, when it's consistent across all of our buildings and you can feel that culture, the strength of, but that's just emotional, like when that happens. But I think more specifically looking at when you talk about Marcus, for instance, that involves critical incidents. So I would, of course, like to see those decrease. So that's a data piece for me as I look at success, and when we look at the level of supports our kids can get, do they have access? That's looking at. So I sit down I work with mental health team lead, Laura Ruffing. She's fantastic. And so we look at data. And so we're trying to capture how are we successful in setting up our programming to support our kids in the right ways? Where do we need more need? Where do we need more support for students? So having that run effectively for us so that our kids have somewhere to go and some place to get support. And then also being able to build in some additional supports. Like I wanted, if you said to me, what's your number one goal, resources for our teachers and for our classrooms and for our parents, 100%. So my hope is the growth to it, but not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's good. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, Nathan, I will echo the gratitude. It's very impressive, the work that's already been, the foundation that's already been built, that you've helped pull together. I have a few specific questions regarding some of the things that you shared. I'll say the first one is when you use the example of with PBIS and setting the expectations. The specific example was executive functioning, and you guys are at the space where correct me if I'm wrong, where you've essentially taught the teachers at this point. And so then presumably the next step is to teach the students. And I think one of my peers asked a question of is there autonomy within the schools as to what that looks like? Well, do you have any sense for what that looks like for high schoolers? Because I have to imagine that it just gets more challenging when you get to that level, because you don't have one teacher, right? You have so many different people who are expressing those expectations and ensuring that they all express the same expectations. And then how do you roll it out to teach the students about those expectations? I don't know. I'm curious of what it's going to look like at the high school level, if you have any sense.
So I think for us, that centers on what we've really driven hard. Emily and Rob have helped a lot with this, and making sure that we have team meetings happening in our buildings so that we have what we call student support teams. And so counselors, mental health specialists, administrators are all meeting in the buildings bi-weekly at least, most often weekly, to talk about our programming and consistency and student needs. So the hope is, and also Kelly did a wonderful job of taking that executive functioning from elementary to high school. Like we did it every group, every age level. So getting that buy-in, and what's important is you can tell, but you don't know how well it's being applied. And so you have to also have the coaching aspect of it. And so I think that getting into buildings and giving principals the tools to be able to go in and help, instructional coaches to go into classrooms and see that there's support that's happening and that there's consistency that's happening. And it's also kind of built into what is an expectation as a building administrator. Like if you ask me as a building principal that same question, I would say that would be a part of our evaluation process. So I'd want to know what folks are doing in their classrooms around executive functioning. So it just takes having those conversations, but you have to give the information and the tools. And so that's what's been a big push this year, is just getting the resources in front of people and the educational part of it so they know how to do those things. So if you told me to teach somebody how to get organized, I have to focus on that myself a little bit, and then I could teach somebody. So having that vocabulary is really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. And so kudos for the appropriate emphasis of setting the teachers up for success to be able to then turn around and convey that to the students in a manner that is consistent and can be heard and hopefully implemented, obviously, on the student side, because that's the ultimate objective, which then helps everyone, culture, environment, their individual performance, everyone. That's great. Is PACS elementary based only, just out of curiosity?
It's not. The research says it's pre-K to 12.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. And then if I'm a community member listening to this, whether I'm here or I'm listening dialed in, and I see the resources that exist within our school district, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to throw you a softball. And my family is experiencing some type of trauma, which is obviously impacting my students. Where do I start?
Start with your building administrator, 100%.
Yeah. So I hope our community hears that. Our principals understand the resources that we have available and can best direct you how to get in touch with them and make sure that we appropriately support our students. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. I don't have any additional questions. I just want to say that I appreciate how you're building a foundation here to support our students so that they can thrive. I love this no, not this one. There's the last chart. You don't have to turn to it, but just the levels of support that we're giving our students. I love the collaboration. I love that it connects with other initiatives that we're doing in our district. So thank you for all of your work. Thank you for all of your work that you all are doing here. It's helpful, and that is a good question about what's the initial entry point for a family if their student is needing some additional support. So thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Okay, we are here to welcome Representative Dr. Anita Samani. We are so grateful that you have taken time to come out and talk to us tonight about legislation that's happening at our State House and how it impacts public education.
Thank you. Just want to, hopefully it's going to show up. First of all, I want to say I'm really, really sorry after that great presentation that I'm going to disappoint you all with the wonderful things we're doing at the State House. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I voted no on this budget. And I think it's awful, and it really does a disservice to the wonderful schools we have here in Franklin County, including Worthington. It's just really sad to see how public schools aren't getting the credit and the recognition and the financial support they deserve. So first thing, I'm just going to go quickly over our agenda. The budget overview, school policy changes that are happening. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Fiscal changes, school vouchers, which sound good in theory, but are awful in reality. And then some positive items that we're going to talk about. And then the general budget in terms of what it's doing to harm to harm kids in Ohio. And then the last things I'm going to cover, issue 2, as well as the fact that there is the May Day rally to support education and public education. That's this Thursday at the State House. So if anybody wants to make their displeasure known and to support the protesters that have been coming out to the State House, please do so. So first of all, our budget has slashed funding from a lot of different critical programs. And think of Ohio as a microcosm of the federal level in terms of the budget cuts there are to fund tax cuts for billionaires. Here, our shifting of budget dollars will provide $600 million to the Browns to be able to get a new stadium. And that, interestingly enough, is not going to be paid back the way other bonds are paid back. So it really does not help the average Ohioan. And now the Cincinnati Bengals are starting to ask for similar amounts of money. So we'll see what happens. So in terms of education, the biggest thing that has changed is the Fair School Funding Plan, also known as the Cupp-Patterson Funding Plan, was designed to go in effect in 3 different waves. And part of it had been funded, and this last cycle would have fully funded schools to compensate for the money that had been given to private school vouchers. But because we have a new Speaker of the House, because of things that have changed, that is not going to happen, and that has been a huge battle at the State House. And it's still not done. It's not etched in stone. So you all can still call the Senate, call the people that are in the Senate, call the Speaker of the House, because the House and the Senate budgets have to be reconciled. So essentially what will happen is the libraries are going to be funded differently. It cuts $90 million from public library funds. The talking points are that it actually doesn't cut money, but the reality is it does because they're funding it differently. They're not funding it the way they used to in the past. By giving a certain percentage to the schools, they're taking it from a different fund. So when you hear someone say, oh, no, we're not cutting public funds, ask them how that's possible when they're taking the money from a different pot. In the last General Assembly, which was my first term as a district rep, and at that time I represented District 11, and this is my first term representing District 8, we gave over $1 billion to private and charter school vouchers. So the budget assumed that it would probably be half of that, and it unfortunately was way more than they expected. If you look at Ohio and you look at what happens, the vast majority of those vouchers actually go to kids already enrolled in private schools. 90% of students in Ohio go to public schools. And where you see the biggest impact is not in areas like Franklin County, but it's more in the rural areas where they don't have any other options for schools. So it takes the money away from schools and basically says that if you are a good steward of your money and you're planning ahead, then that, if you end up saving more than 30% of your budget in a cycle, you'll be forced to either spend that money or that money is going to go back to your people who live in your district. And it's a way that they're basically trying to cover up the fact that we're not doing anything to help people's property taxes. So by doing this, they're going to take away the idea of what you all do, which is to plan ahead, to plan for inflation, to plan for times where maybe you don't get as much from taxes and stuff, and make it harder for schools to plan ahead. It will also impact the bonds. So the AAA bond ratings that most schools have, if you cannot budget and save, thank you, that will be impacted by this change. So it really is not helpful. And again, the way that Republicans, the way the majority is couching it is to say, hey, you know what? We're actually giving you money back for property taxes. We're making it better for people in your district. So it's not true, and I would really try to encourage you, and I know some of you have come and testified at the State House. I think it's really important to make your voices heard because I, as a taxpayer, don't want my money going to vouchers. I don't want my schools to be forced to not be able to plan for the future. So what else do we have here? School policy changes. This has been a big topic, and I think it kind of segues into what you all were talking about with mental health. Banning phones, kids having phones on school property. I don't know how teachers feel about that. I don't know how principals feel about that. My kids are adults and grown up. But there's a lot of, questions about mental health. Does it help to have phones in schools? But parents will often say, well, I want my kids to have phones because I want to be able to reach them if there's an emergency or a school shooting or whatever else there may be. But this is going to be at the state level, basically saying there will be no phones in schools. The other one that has been kind of pushed down everybody's throat because a lot of schools have pushed back on LifeWise and the LifeWise Academy about taking kids out of schools. What they're doing is they're mandating that children be allowed to attend religious or release time religious instruction for at least 1 hour per week. Westerville is one school that fought back. I can't remember if Worthington did, but a lot of the schools said it was very disruptive. Kids were coming back into school, showing other kids treats they had gotten. So it's modifying the bill, and it's saying that these kids don't have to go off campus for religious, but they can attend it within the school system. Eliminates kindergarten readiness. So again, this has been around for over 10 years. And as you all know, the pandemic did set our kids back quite a bit. And to eliminate kindergarten readiness programs makes no sense. So we're doing a lot to hurt kids, and it's really sad. And I hope that you can get parents to speak out, speak to your neighbors, talk to them about really that the budget is not finalized till the end of June. So really making sure that we talk about it. Financial changes, that was the thing, one of the things that we talked about is district revenue forecasts will drop from 5 years to 3 years. So that also makes it harder to plan ahead. It makes it harder for large purchases to be made, for school improvements to happen. And it forces schools to sell vacant buildings. I don't know that would happen here in Worthington, but other districts where the number of kids in a public school are going down, for example, Columbus schools, the vacant buildings would have to be sold in public auction to the highest bidder. So that also eliminates or changes revenue streams and can impact how schools get money for a vacant building. Vouchers, this is crazy if you think about the Constitution and the fact that state, school, religion should be separated, but it's not. And we have now over $1 billion that's being allocated to vouchers for private and charter schools. As you all know, you all have to jump through a lot of hoops. You have to make sure that you follow standards. Private schools, charter schools, Catholic religious schools don't have to, or any religious schools do not have to follow those same standards. So that's really critical for taxpayers to know that their dollars are going to these schools without any accountability. And, again, in theory, it sounds great that kids can make choices as to where they want to go to school and go to the school that fits them best. But these schools, unlike public schools, can tell the kids, we don't want you here. We don't have those special needs programs, or we don't have honors programs, or we don't have the things that you need. They can also discriminate on race. They can discriminate on a number of things without any accountability. So the next step is also the 90% of voucher recipients are not low-income qualified. They changed the income status so that parents that were of higher incomes basically could qualify for vouchers. And last assembly, I had parents that emailed me that were living in Dublin, were sending their kids to Catholic schools that said, I'm really against these vouchers. I pay my taxes and I choose to send my kids to Catholic schools, but the schools are now telling me I have to apply for the vouchers because they're raising their tuition so that they can get the voucher money. And so, again, everybody kind of works the system, and that's what's happening. And I think, and I can't emphasize enough that we are not being good stewards of people's taxes, and we need to do better, and we need to have people protest about that. The non-chartered educational savings account program, and this, it's very confusing, and Anna and I were talking about it. Essentially, it's comparable to like a college savings program. So it gives money to parents to use on these voucher, on schools that are voucher eligible, but that would include everything from, I think they're trying to include, and I would need to confirm that, but like homeschooling or other private schools that are not accredited. So there's no oversight, and there's no way to know what those dollars are being spent on. So what is positive in this budget? There's a transportation work group that will work with schools to identify and address school transportation issues. A lot of schools have had trouble either finding bus drivers, or budget cuts have led to not being able to provide transportation for schools. The school bus safety grants program, again, to give more funding for repairs, to add safety features to buses. Seat belts have been discussed on and off for a long time. Diabetes informational materials. As you all know, the incidence of diabetes is going up. So giving people information on type 1 diabetes, whether it be diet, education about insulin and injecting, those types of things. And that would come from the Ohio Department of Health and then be distributed to schools. And then absenteeism, I think, has become more of an issue since the pandemic also. So there'll be data from schools looking at, reasons for why kids are absent, what schools can maybe do to help decrease that absenteeism rate. There's a lot of talk about being pro-family and pro-children and pro-baby, but the reality is our budget does not reflect that at all. And the biggest things that have changed, the governor had these in his budget and they were taken out. The governor had planned to use sin taxes to cover the child tax credit. So taxes on tobacco and non-tobacco smoke products like vaping and chewing tobacco and stuff, and sports gambling. All of that got taken out by our House budget. So because that taxing, that ability to collect taxes, to collect more money, to give money for the child tax credit, that was then removed. So there was money from the pandemic, but there had been a child tax credit of $1,000 per child for any kid under the age of 7. Your parents could claim that. It cut funding, and again, the party line is it doesn't cut funding, it just keeps it stagnant. But in reality, it does cut funding. And it cuts the ability of safety programs that are addressing lead poisoning, which impacts kids disproportionately. Forcing libraries to restrict material regarding sexual orientation or gender identity. to areas for those over the age of 18. We know that our kids are getting most of their information from social media. We know that they're not going necessarily to the library, but this is a huge, public, I don't want to call it civil rights, but just the idea that people can't choose for themselves what they read and what they look at, and help their kids determine what to read and what to look at. Continuous Medicaid enrollment, again, when parents don't have to go in every 6 months or every year to enroll their kids between the ages of 0 and 3, they can provide more of the preventative care, the immunizations, the developmental milestones that pediatricians look for. So by removing that continuous Medicaid enrollment, you're now forcing parents to go in every 6 months and re-enroll their kids. So kids will definitely fall through the cracks, and it makes it harder for them to access health care as needed. What is issue 2? I've been hearing, don't vote for issue 2. Everybody at the State House is not good stewards of money. They're taking away money. We should force them to put money from the State House. Well, this particular bond issue has been passed every 10 years for the last 40 years. So the money is already there. It's not new money. It's not shifting money from anywhere. It's just voting to say that we still want to have infrastructure improvements over the next 10 years, and we want to use the money that's already available through these bonds. So it'll pay for things like roads, bridges, waste management, and the money goes to the local governments, to the municipalities. So it is not regulated by the State House. So that is something to really be aware of. If people are wondering, should I vote yes? Should I vote no? It's one of those things that can become confusing. But for the last 40 years, every 10 years it's been on the ballot, people have voted yes, and it's continued to support municipalities and more local government, which again, we're busy trying to take away a lot of the control that local governments have. So this is a really good thing to be aware of. And early voting is going on right now. The actual day for elections is next, God, I can't believe it's May already, next Tuesday. So make sure, again, please talk to people. Please because the number of people who vote in May is about 10%. It's really dismal. So if we're going to have only 10% of people voting, we need that 10% to vote yes on issue 2. So how do we advocate? I think a lot of people have done this already, but calling for these particular issues, calling the chair of Senate Finance, Jerry Serino, who was also the architect behind SB 1, which is the higher education bill. And not to be outdone, there will be a bill that will impact lower education the same way. So I'm just giving you guys a preview of what to expect. But we're going to see some of the same issues that were in SB 1 come up in different bills for the lower education. The Senate Education Committee, Andrew Brenner, big fan of vouchers, but I think that the more people that call, the more pushback they get. Hopefully, the more people will recognize how harmful this is to Ohio. We're already facing a crisis with the population aging, with young people moving out of the state. So we need to keep talking about that stuff. The Senate President, Rob McCauley, and the Speaker of the House, Matt Huffman, are both on the same page when it comes to a lot of these issues. But again, even if you are not in their district, what they do impacts all of us. So I think it really is imperative for everybody to call about these things. And then staying in the know. You can get our newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter specifically by going to ohiohouse.gov and then just requesting to be on our mailing list. You can get on any committee that you want to follow. You can just sign up for the emails. You won't get solicitation for donations. You won't get text messages. It's strictly going to send you, hey, this is the committee, this is the agenda for the committee, and these are the things, the bills that will be either proponent testimony or opponent testimony. So if you want to follow any of that, if you have so much time on your hands that you want to actually watch what we're doing, you can get on ohiochannel.org. Every committee it's like C-SPAN for Ohio. Every committee is televised live. You will see who's falling asleep during committee, who's not there. who's on their cell phone, but it is literally available to anybody who wants to watch it. And then Ohio House, State House News. There's some other news sources that can give you good information too. So that's kind of how people can stay in the know. You can follow us on social media if you are on social media. Ohio House Dems, we all have our own social media accounts. Beth Liston, who's the senator for this area, and myself both are posting. My aide, Anna, and I do a Fun Facts Friday, so we talk about what's coming up and what's involved in some of the bills. So with that, I'm going to close and take questions. Please don't throw anything at me.
We would never. We appreciate you making the time, and we know that you are extremely busy. So, Nikki, I'm going to start with you, and then we're just going to work our way down for any questions or comments.
I actually, during Dr. Samani, during your presentation, leaned over and said to Amber, why don't you start? But that's just because she's our legislative liaison and she's most closely tied. I will express great gratitude. I would hope that I'm not surprised that many of us are aware of a lot of what you shared, but not that our community is not aware, right?
Yeah.
And so much of this is raising awareness and giving people direct ways to engage and make a difference, and you hit all of those points. I will share one thing that I was completely floored by, and I want to make sure that I heard you correctly, that the current budget not only proposes the requirement of 1 hour per week for release time for religious instruction. I would just note, without any presumable, like, why wouldn't you say one period? Like, periods in schools are different times. So not every school has a 1 hour for a given period, and therefore it's going to be disruptive in and of itself by mandating a particular time period instead of an entire period of class. But then does it require us to actually host them on our property?
So this is where I think bills get through with unintended consequences. I don't think anybody ever thought through how to actually make this happen.
Articulate it?
Or to implement it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I honestly don't know, like, if they're just going to tell schools, here you are, here's the law, figure out how to follow it, or if there is going to be more detailed instruction on that. But yeah, I agree. I mean, every school has different time periods, different grades have, whether you're in elementary or middle school or high school, your periods are different. So yeah, and I don't know that mandating that means every parent has to take advantage of it either. There may be parents who are like, no, we're not interested in this. So again, and what kind of religion are we mandating? What kind of instruction are we mandating? Are we mandating just Christian, or are we saying, we can mandate Hindu religions and Muslims and, any other religion to come in? None of that is clarified.
Has there been any rumblings of challenging this as unconstitutional?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that a group of schools have gotten together to sue about the school vouchers. And I know that there are some parent groups that are looking at how to do that. And I think that unfortunately in Ohio, we have a Supreme Court that is very imbalanced. So it's going to be hard if it is challenged at the Supreme Court level. This would be something that maybe would work its way up. But again, this kind of stuff is now being proposed at the national and federal level too. So,
right, exactly.
And that's why that Thursday is so important, because they're rallying, with unions rallying across the country to say we want to support public education. Public education is what helps people to improve their socioeconomic status. It's what improves critical thinking. It's what leads to communities. When you learn in public schools and you're exposed to different thoughts and different people from different backgrounds, that's how you as a person grow. My parents came here as immigrants. I'm a first generation person, and I went to public schools. My parents, were amazed because in India, this isn't available. my kids went to public schools here in Columbus, and I have always been a strong believer in public schools. So it's devastating to see what's happening and how, because we haven't paid attention, and I'm guilty of that too, everything's going fine, so you don't really think about it. But in the meantime, all these things have been put into place along the way that have really hurt our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you again for the information, for your service, and your service in an environment where you're constantly receiving that pushback. So there are many of us who are obviously that you represent that are behind you and appreciate what you do. I'll pass it over to Amber.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for, like Nikki said, just your service and everything you're doing. Being in the minority is a tough place to be in the Ohio State House. So thank you so much for that. I will, when you all were talking about the RTRI and 1 hour versus 1 period, I had to go back because when the omnibus dropped from the House, they did make that amendment. So it went from 1 hour to 1 period now. That was the same amendment that adjusted it from 25 to 30% with the carryover balance, which is truly, when we're looking at this from the district level, what we, I think, are most concerned about. Obviously, there are a lot of concerning factors in that, but that's, the one thing, that would just.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that from Dublin also. I've been
Yes.
talking to some of the people in Dublin. It's the same thing, the carryovers. And I'm like, what about the vouchers? That's also impacting your financial stability. But I think the carryover is probably, for long-term planning, the biggest risk and the biggest concern.
Right, and I'm sure TJ could articulate that better than I could, but I think that is definitely the big sticking point. And anything that, you could do, the caucus could do, obviously our community could do to sort of move that needle a little bit and get them to understand sort of how that would decimate school districts, not here in Worthington, but also across the state,
But if your goal is to destroy public schools, then, this is how you do it. Yeah. So I think what I find really frustrating is that the people that are impacted the most are the people that are the ones doing this stuff. Columbus and Franklin County are growing. There's a lot of options when it comes to schools. The school systems are, people move to Worthington because of the schools. People move to Dublin or to Upper Arlington because of the schools. That is not happening in these rural areas, but those are the areas where the representatives have the most power at the State House. And they are decimating education in their communities because those communities don't have alternatives.
Right. No, I grew up in one of
Yeah.
those communities. I'm very, very aware. The question I had was sort of related to the carryover balance and just the bill's over in the Senate now. So I know that it's kind of off your plate for a little bit. It's coming back. But are you hearing anything just from your colleagues over in the Senate or conversations you're having with your other House colleagues across the aisle, about sort of where things, because I know that in a lot of the committee meetings, I do sort of have that on in the background a lot of days when they're having the conversations about this. And the question that kept coming up over and over and over again was, what percentage do you feel comfortable with? And it's different for every district, right? A percentage that we might feel comfortable with wouldn't be a percentage that Gal Police, where I grew up, would be, comfortable with. So
I think sometimes the answer should be, you shouldn't be controlling this. This should be left to our local school districts because every district has different needs. It's hard to coordinate that answer, but I feel like sometimes hearing that over and over again is maybe the right answer, to articulate, you want small government. This is not small government. This is interfering in every community's ability to determine how they are good stewards of the money that they get.
When they're calling it property tax relief. And
Right.
as Trent has written in his blog and op-ed that was in the Dispatch, it's not.
It's not.
a one-time. So, but of the bills that are property tax relief, and there are a lot of them that have
Yeah,
been
none of them are
introduced.
moving very well.
I was gonna say, I mean, has there been any kind of analysis of what, because a lot of them like contradict one another, and I don't even know if they would, is there any kind of like comprehensive look at all of these bills that's being done by LSC or anyone to sort of identify like what the fiscal impact is if like this bill passes and this bill passes and how they would work together? I
Yeah.
mean, it's interesting that it's not an omnibus bill in itself, that it's all piecemeal, and a lot of them are the same sponsors, so it's very confusing. So I didn't
Yeah.
know if you had any like insight into.
Do you have any insight on that? I know.
I don't know if they have any like fiscal impact, like the broader bill to work this together. I know LC obviously does fiscal impacts for individual.
Right.
For individual needs.
Yeah.
But to tie them all together, I don't,
Yeah.
think that's
I know
good.
that you can make requests of LSC, but I don't know what the resources are. So, I mean, I guess those are all the questions I had. I was just kind of, interested in sort of what kind of things you knew behind the scenes. So thank you for coming. Thank
Yeah.
you for talking us through all that. I appreciate it.
anybody else?
It's good to
Hi,
see you.
Stephanie. Good to see you.
So I have a question, and if you don't have the details, totally fine. But you mentioned that the Browns stadium bond would not be paid back in the traditional way. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so typically bonds are paid through not just public use, but also through taxes that come from the city, like taxing hotels or retail establishments, tourist taxes, things like that, like bed taxes. The way this is set up, it would be strictly the bond repayment would come from ticket sales and use of the stadium.
Okay.
Which is different from how, the Cavs and some of the other teams up in Cleveland have paid back this, or, brought money to the city. So that's the big
Okay.
difference.
It's helpful because it's this big disparate bill, right? But then if you start to like put the pieces together and the money's going out here and then it's taken away here. And so when we have conversations with community members and trying to put everything together, that is a helpful piece because I wasn't
Yeah.
sure how that worked.
If anybody is into podcasts, there's a podcast from the Cleveland,
I love podcasts.
Cleveland.com, like the Cleveland Inquirer does one every day called Today in Ohio.
Okay.
And it's Chris Quinn and two other people. It's a great, easy car listen,
Okay.
It's something that I learned stuff from too, that it's Cleveland focused, but they do a lot of bashing the State House too.
Fair. Is the piece, I'm afraid to ask this, is the piece that defines gender still in there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. It is still, there's two things that really irk me as a physician. One is that the Department of Health is now going to be required to only have two sexes identified, male and female, which if you have any science knowledge, you would know that's not
Right.
true. And the other one is they're now creating a registry. There was already a registry for doctors had to report abortions, but not much in the way of details, just that, an abortion was performed. Now it will include a zip code of where, because people are coming from, Ohio is the only state from all the way down to Florida, people are coming to Ohio for abortions because there is very limited access between Florida and here and because of the issue one that we passed and the Reproductive Rights Amendment, we still have the ability to provide abortions, but they're trying to create a registry and make it harder to, they can't penalize people because of the amendment. They can't restrict it because a lot of the things have already been taken away from the courts, but they are keeping that. The other thing that is really kind of tragic is funding for the public health labs. So public health labs are the ones that track measles outbreaks. They do bioterrorism testing, and they do it for the Midwest. It's not just for Ohio. They do it for a lot of states that are surrounding us. testing for, if there's a syphilis outbreak or, whatever public health issue is happening. That funding, again, it wasn't cut, but it wasn't increased, and they haven't had an increase in several years. So they were really looking, and the governor, again, had put increases in the budget, but then it got taken out, so.
I think that's all. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I just keep giving bad news.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
being here. It's very nice to meet you, and we appreciate your discussion on the budget. And although I feel we're all pretty educated on the budget, I still learn things from this. So that was really very helpful and unrelated to schools. But you talked about issue 2, which has really not been in the news, and I have not seen much on that. So
Yeah.
I really didn't know that I'd have much to vote for next week. So I appreciate you bringing that up. You had a list of some of the Senate leaders that we can contact, which we appreciate that. And I know we have all been writing and contacting as much as we can. Once it's approved by the Senate and it goes to committee, we go back and chat with our Republican leaders, right?
Right.
Not now. We should
Right.
wait until we see what the Senate does.
Right now, you should be still calling the Senate. You should be calling the Senate, telling them your objections to the budget. And then when it goes back for reconciliation, and then there's one more chance, you can ask the governor to line item veto stuff. And that's happened in the past. Right now, because they don't have a veto-proof majority, that if a governor vetoes something, it would be a little bit harder to come back. In the past, they've been able to, override a veto. This time around, they can't. So that's another step in the process of trying to create a budget that's, good for Ohio, better than the budget is to improve it.
Yes. And you use the word call these people, but you had their email addresses. Do you think calling their office is more effective than an email?
I think both. I think
Okay.
that we look at the number of calls we get on issues.
Okay.
Oftentimes, they'll get these form emails and they'll discount them and say, oh, this is some woke group that's sending all these emails,
That they're all the same.
They're all the
whatever.
same, right. Because oftentimes unions or, special interest groups will say, hey, just click on this and send it to your, senator, your representative. And I think they're still important, but I know I've heard from my Republican colleagues that they don't view those as valuable. But if they're getting phone calls and their aides are getting those phone calls, then they know that it's real people calling.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Samani. Okay. Now we will be joined by Assistant Superintendent Jeff Maddox, who is going to present the first reading of the 2026-2027 calendar. I want to emphasize this is not this upcoming school year, but the year after.
Correct. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege to introduce the first reading of the 26-27 school calendar. As you know, how we propose school calendars appears as Article 22.1 in the WEA negotiated agreement, spells out how we do this. And it also mentions that we propose 3 calendars. This year, we actually ended up proposing 4 calendars, just the way it fell out. And we send it to a vote to the community. WEA, which are the teachers, WESP, which is classified, and administrators. And in developing the school calendar, the goal is to create a calendar that provides Worthington students the best opportunity to grow and to achieve, allows high school students to complete the first semester exams before winter holiday, creates high school semesters that are as close to equal as possible, has consistent instructional blocks of time, has as many 5-day weeks as possible, is free from late starts and early releases to increase consistency, works with the state testing calendar, and meets community expectations for schooling in Worthington. And without further ado, in closer C3 will point you to the fact that Calendar D was the winner. Not only was it the winner, it received the most votes in all 4 of those categories. And to kind of highlight some of the points of Calendar D, the teacher calendar start is August 17th. Student start is August 19th. Winter break starts December 21st, and students and staff return January 4th. Spring break starts March 26th, and students and staff return April 5th. Last day for students is May 27th. Last day for teachers is May 28th. And we were able to do all of that because that is the year that Memorial Day happens to fall on May 31st. So it will be ahead of Memorial Day. So at this time, that's the first calendar reading for the 26-27 calendar.
Thanks, Mr. Maddox.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have, I have a question. I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions? I do have a question.
I was out of here.
Do any of you have any questions? One is, I guess, statement first is that I love that each group votes for the same, so that we're not like, and I think that that's happened the last couple of votes.
It has. It does make easy standing at this podium when all 4 vote for the same calendar, right?
My question, though, is when you present the calendars to staff, the community, how much time do we allow for that voting to happen, and how is that determined? Do you know?
If I'd have to go back and look, it was at least 3 or 4 weeks worth of
Okay.
time to vote. It was out there for a while.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome.
You're
Thank you.
good. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, moving on. Superintendent's report, Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We do that through our 4 vision statements, and so we organize this report under those vision statements. And so our first vision statements, we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. Just want to report that we're excited to see strong interest in our summer programs across all grade levels. And summer is right around the corner. As of April 15th, we had 279 students registered for K-2 intervention, 199 students for 3-5 intervention, 100 students for 6th, 7th grade project-based learning, 50 for 8th grade Bridge to High School program, 85 students enrolled already in credit recovery with over 200 expected. 140 students were signed up for Camp Broadway and high school Get Ahead courses. And our kindergarten through 8th grade Worthington Summer Enrichment Academy already has 682 students registered. So we expect to serve 2,000 students or so in summer programming. Registration is ongoing, so if you're looking for summer programming, don't delay. But as much as we want to keep holding on to this school year, we're excited for summer. Our second vision statements, we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. Worthington Schools is grateful for the many volunteers who support our school district. In April, we're proud to recognize some of them. Earlier this evening, the Lions Club, the Worthington Noon Lions Club, honored outstanding volunteers from each of our 21 schools. We appreciate that. On April 30th, we'll celebrate 192 volunteers who worked this year in our Kindergarten Ready for Reading program. 192. That's pretty awesome. So these events highlight just a few of the many individuals who give their time to enrich our schools. Our third vision statements, we will provide consistent communication to promote dialogue with our community. This week, we've launched a 4-part blog post series on school finance, and it's something that we hope everyone in Worthington will take notice of. Today's post was titled, Where Things Stand with the State Budget in Worthington Schools. Tuesday, which is tomorrow, you'll see why Worthington and schools across Ohio have a cash balance. Wednesday will be how would a 30% carryover cap limit impact Worthington? And Thursday, how can we advocate for Worthington schools? So we want to really direct everyone to those, and then pay special attention Thursday, where you could go back and read all the 3 preceding posts, and then dig into our advocacy website, which will be live for the community on Thursday. Our 4th vision statements will be responsible and transparent with our community resources. I wanted to piggyback earlier. I was really proud of the work that Nathan Kellenberger has done this year as our coordinator of student behavior and mental health. That position, as Nathan alluded to, came out of our special education audit. So when we audited our special education process, one of the recommendations was that there would be one person who would support behavior and mental health. And I think this is an example of our responsible staffing plan in action. So when we knew we had this need and the audit called for that, we decided not to replace a position that we had for many years that was teaching teachers how to use technology. And instead, we felt like the need today was in student behavior and mental health. And so that was a shift of something that we used to offer to something that we think we need to offer today. And we think that's a responsible and transparent way to use our community resources. President Davis, that's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bauer. Treasurer Cusick, Treasurer's report.
Thank you. I did want to touch on 2 words that Representative Samani mentioned, planning and control. That is really what's under attack in this CAP proposal. And really something that any entity, any business, any nonprofit, any school district needs in order to be financially sustainable. We need planning and control, and that CAP really does take that away. And so, as Dr. Bauer mentioned, we will have these 4 blog posts. Tomorrow's post is really important, I think, to understand why school districts have cash balances and why we're different from cities, townships, the state of Ohio itself. Because I think a lot of misconception comes from pointing at a chart, at a dollar figure, and saying, well, that shouldn't be. And schools really are funded differently. And spoiler alert, it's because our revenue doesn't grow. So we have to plan to stay off the ballot, and that's why any school district is going to have a fluctuating cash balance level. So I think it's important to review those blog posts coming out and understand that, and continue to advocate that we really want that planning and control opportunity to remain local so that we can do our jobs. The only thing I want to mention tonight on the agenda, I want to talk about the 2 items to provide some background. So I'm recommending approval of a termination benefits fund. That's a fund that's allowed in Ohio Revised Code. So every year we budget in the general fund termination pay for retiring employees. And in any given year, it's a guess, right? We guess how many employees we think are going to retire, and hopefully we've budgeted enough. And fluctuations come like they have this year with changes in state retirement system. That could be larger than any other given year. And so this mechanism in Ohio Revised Code allows us to set aside money into a reserve fund every year on a level basis, so that can take away those fluctuations in our operating fund and avoid a sort of damaging budgetary situation. So that's why you see the recommendation to establish the fund. It's a little bit backwards on the agenda in theory, because we first have to appropriate the dollars. So you're going to see an appropriations for $2.7 million, and then you're going to see the establishment of the fund. And really that's just so that we can be forward thinking and mitigate any future variance in severance payments. So I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to there, but that is all my report.
Thank you, TJ. Any questions for TJ? Okay. Moving on to board committee reports and announcements. Thank you, Nikki.
I'm going to volunteer to go first because I haven't had any committee meetings since our last meeting, so mine is brief, and I will pass it to Amber.
How did that work out?
I know.
I mean, the calendar.
Last time, I think I was the one that had all of them.
Yeah.
And then, yes. Easter.
Well, I had a few. So just starting with, since we've been talking about the legislature, most everything in my report's been covered. But I did want to just share, I thought this was a strong, 2 strong groups to show opposition to the cash balance cap. I guess the county commissioners and both the county auditors have both come out and publicize that they are against that. So I think that both of those groups are great to have in our corner. So just wanted to share that with you all. It's the bills in the Senate. Committee meetings are going to start this week. From what I'm hearing, it's going to move fast. They will release the sub-bill. They'll have about a week to add amendments, and then the omnibus will go back over to the House. So that's the timeline. Trent did mention sort of the advocacy webpage that Vicki and Corey and crew have been working on. It kind of came out of the communications committee. We were talking about just, the need to sort of give our community tools to mobilize and make their voices heard. So I'm excited about that. Seen early drafts, but it's going to be a website that then has the collateral materials attached, like a phone script and a form letter, but it also has personalization, so it's not just like the, icky form letters, so everyone has their opportunity to tell their story and make that plea with the legislature about why this is important in Worthington. So I think that's all I was gonna share with that. Sorry, TJ, were you? Oh, you were turning it off. Yeah, and then communications committee, I mentioned that. One thing that we discussed, but we kind of determined there's just not enough time left in the school year, but I do still like the idea. We've talked about getting out into the community and talking with parents and everything. We talked about like a PTA tour that maybe the board could do. And, I remember you, when I was president at Phoenix, came and gave us like a school board update, kind of like Rep. Samani did for us. And, I think that would be great to kind of get out in the community and meet those parents where they are, and they're just doing such great work. So I offer that to the full board for, consideration. I like the idea, but I do agree that, it's just not the best timing at the end of the school year. Everybody's finishing up. But that was the communications committee. I sat in on CLC for Jennifer. It had been a while since I got to go to one of those. I used to be the liaison back in my PTA days. So that was nice to see the AAPL team giving updates. Trent talked about the Summer Enrichment Academy. That was one of my big takeaways with that. One parent did offer some feedback that I thought made sense, just because I remember what it was like trying to schedule camps for elementary school age children. And she asked that maybe the dates could be released a little bit earlier for planning purposes, so that she knows what the district's doing and can take that into consideration when planning out the summer. So I thought that was good feedback. And that came out of that meeting. I also thought that the math pathways that also came out in Key Communicators too. I went home and told my middle schooler about that one, because that one's going to directly affect her. But so the pathways are going to be changing for the math. So that was shared with that group, and then Key Communicators as well, which I also had. Kelly and I were in there and talked about budget a lot. The community had a lot of good feedback, a lot of good questions. That was kind of another reaffirming moment with the advocacy kit, because there was a lot of requests in that room for how can we help, what can we do, So we were able to tell them that we've got something coming. So that was the external group. And then the internal group talked about STRS. They're reducing the age, right, from 35 years of service to 32. So Trent talked to the teachers about that, and then also OST testing, Senate Bill 1, that was a question somebody brought up. And the no convocation because of no auditorium there's a lot of in the room after that came out. So yeah, it's just gonna be tough this year without an auditorium. So, but the teachers seemed disappointed that was not going to be taking place. But I don't know if I got to everything, Kelly. You can fill in some of my gaps there with Key Communicators, but that was what I had in my notes. So that's my report.
I only had one thing, and it was also the curriculum liaison committee. And some of the stuff we've talked about in here, and would be a repeat, but we got another update on the special education audit. And every time we get an update, I feel like we've gone miles. And so it's awesome. And one of the things that we talked about this time, so we've talked before, and Angie, correct me if I get anything wrong, because, was this idea that one of the pieces of feedback that we got was we needed more intentional instruction time. Instead of pulling kids out, they would stay in the classroom, and that we would change our staffing based on that. And so we're starting to do that. And part of that is expanding instructional coaching so that teachers really feel like they are able and have the tools that they need to provide for their students. And we're starting that in phases. So it's going to start with, I think, Math Algebra 1 in the high school, and then we'll expand from there. But it was just really good to hear kind of those concrete examples of ways that we're both supporting our teachers and supporting our students and really putting the audit into action. So that was really great to hear. And they talked about how we're making connections between CKLA, across different disciplines, right? So that we're really taking those opportunities for kids to have multiple touch points with ideas and reinforcing what they're learning in their English class, in their science class, and things like that, which is really, we know that's how kids make rich meaning and how they retain it. So that was really, it's great that we've come so far that we're able to make those connections now. So I was really excited to hear that. And then Steve shared with us that our teachers are going through a certification for the academic language practice, I think. It was CALP, but I try anyway, which is really great. But then we also are one of two districts in Central Ohio that now has a teacher that is certified to train our teachers in CALP, which is a big deal. It's a huge time commitment, which kind of goes back to the comment I made earlier with Nathan, that we have teachers that are willing to make these sacrifices for their students. And it's just hugely beneficial for our district. So that was just a really exciting thing that's going to benefit us across the elementary schools.
Stephanie, what did you say it's called? Or just what is it about? Like the acronym, I got CALP, but I didn't
Yes.
get. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Certified Academic Language Practitioner. And so think about the gold standard for structured literacy. So you hear Wilson Reading, you hear Orton Gillingham. This is kind of the gold standard above all of that, to make sure that our teachers are ready from a structured literacy standpoint.
Out of curiosity, do you know if it came out of Atlanta?
This is, I don't know the answer to that. I
Okay.
know our training happens in Canton,
Okay.
but I'm not sure the
I
answer.
only asked that because I learned just this weekend, and I think it's CALP. And it's like you said, it's like a step above Orton Gillingham. So that's fascinating that we're already there.
And so the thing that they kind of reinforced, and it makes perfect sense, is right, we get all of this into the classroom for all of our students. So tier 1, like we were talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3
Sure.
earlier. That then everybody's getting it, they're getting it in real time. And so hopefully that will circumvent the need for later intervention, right? Because we're just comprehensively serving all of our students. So
Amazing. Thank you.
That's all I got.
Okay, I didn't have a whole lot the past couple of weeks either, but thank you so much, Amber, for attending CLC for me. Never hard to get a replacement for that one, and if needed. Congratulations to Vicki, Corey, Dawn for your OHSPRA, a communication organization award in photography, video, social media, student production. I mean, we really appreciate all your whole team does for our district. So thank you and congratulations on that. And as far as being the library liaison, I do get their agenda every month and I try to look at it and see on their community outreach what fun things they're doing with our schools. And two things jumped out at me in March. They had a family fun night at the Northwest Library for Liberty Elementary School. They opened up the library after hours, and students and parents could come in for activities and a fun evening. So I thought that was really cool. And then Thomas Worthington personal finance teacher reached out to the library because she read about all the free resources, and she had a librarian come in and talk to the kids during their budget time about all the free things that they can get at the library and how that would work on the budget, their electronic resources, the culture passes and all that. And it sounds like the students enjoyed that day. So we really appreciate our library and everything they do with us, and a great partner for our district. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Jennifer. I don't really have anything. You covered pretty much everything for communications and key communicators. Just always appreciate the time to work with our communications team. And I'm looking forward to being able to empower our community to be able to advocate for our district in that way. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that come out. Key communicators, just always great feedback from them. I feel like there's never enough time. And so, yeah. So just appreciate the people that take the time, and the internal key communicators that also take time to come in and give feedback that's helpful, and know how we can support them as a district. The only other additional thing is I went to the National Association for Black School Educators this past weekend. They had a board seminar, and so they had some speakers come in. They had a superintendent talk about achievement and accountability, which was really helpful, just of how boards can support their district, and looking at data for growth and looking at data to close gaps. So that was just really helpful information. Jennifer Hogue from OSBA came and gave a legislative report. They will be providing testimony on May 7th. So just so you know, keep an eye out for that. Then there was a panel of legislators there, very similar to what, Representative Samani, the information that she gave today, and then the information that Amber and all of us have been sharing and providing for one another. But it was just really good to hear just different perspectives and about the process. So I'm glad that they're able to take the time. There was a senator there and then 2 representatives there. So that was really nice to hear. A representative from Dublin City Schools gave a presentation about the education support professionals. So we refer to them as our classified staff. But I loved the introduction to an education support professionals and how much that really encompasses all the things that are that group of individuals and how they support our district, how they support our students on a daily basis. She talked about bus drivers knowing more about kids than sometimes their teachers because they are the front line, right? They see them first. She also talked a lot about food insecurity and how districts can help with that. How we can help, there's the stigma that's behind it, right? And so having a lot of conversation about that. And she also highlighted Senate Bill 109, which would provide no-cost breakfast and lunch to students. So that is some positive legislation that we could look into and also support. And then there was a presentation about the budget process and, how you should be assessing your budget. And I sent TJ a text to say, I really appreciate you because we're in a good spot. I mean, he gives us great information. Dr. Bowers gives us great information. So I think we have a good assessment process here. And I appreciate partnering with all of you in order to make good decisions for our district. So that is my report there. Oh, the one thing we did look at the communications committee is they put together a sheet with our board priorities. So we're still working on that a little bit to make it maybe one page, but just starting point for that so that we can get that on the website. Oh, I did have that there. Okay. Moving on to actions recommended by the treasurer, Mr. Cusick.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the minutes from both meetings on April 14th as presented in enclosure E1, please.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or additions? Okay. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the appropriation transfer listed in your agenda. Again, this is what I mentioned earlier, moving $700,000 from wages into transfers out and then appropriating an additional $2 million to fund the reserve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Any follow-up questions? Okay. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. Moving on to Section G, Personnel Consent Agenda. Dr. Bowers. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, TJ. Item F1, actions recommended by the treasurer, new business.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the board establish a reserve fund in accordance with ORC 5705 as outlined and to make the initial transfer of $2.7 million from the general fund to the termination benefits fund per enclosure F1, please.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Now we will move on to item G, Personnel Consent Agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items G2 through G8 on your agenda. G2 through G8, please.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments?
No.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H1. Item H1 is the acceptance of the donations that are listed on your agenda. H1, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is the recommended motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal from Prodigy for Phase 2 remodeling at the Worthington Operations Center as indicated in the enclosure. So just as a point of reference, the board approved Phase 1 already, and this is Phase 2. And we knew that these were coming as part of when we purchased the operations building, the old Amazon building, to become our Worthington Operations Center. So this is Phase 2 there. So item H2, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments?
Just that I'm very excited that this is still going.
Is there a completion date for this? Or?
We have, that's a good question. So why don't I just not answer that?
Okay.
Jeff, can you answer that, please?
The bulk of Phase 1 should complete in August. The bulk of Phase 2 should complete by December.
Wow, okay. That's great. Fast.
Okay. TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H3. Item H3 is the recommended motion to approve a resolution accepting a proposal also from Prodigy for restroom remodeling at Colonial Hills, Liberty Elementary, and Linworth Experiential Campus, as indicated in the enclosure. Item H3, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. We are moving on to item I. May I please have a motion to approve the resolution opposing several amendments to House Bill 96 and its impact on funding for Worthington schools as indicated in enclosure I-1.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments about the resolution that was attached or edits?
I don't have any edits. I think it was very concise, and I appreciate the needle it thread, but it's good. I think it's in it, the last one that we passed kind of gave more context, so I think this is perfect on the heels of that.
Okay.
Yeah, no questions, but I appreciate, I guess, TJ for writing it. It's clear and concise.
And one page.
Smaller margins.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, are there any requests, questions, or concerns from the board? Okay. Moving on to calendar. Our next meeting, our only meeting in May is Monday, May 12th at 6:30, where we will get a 5-year forecast update from TJ. Then June 5th is our work session where we will go over goal setting for the 2025-2026 school year. That meeting is at noon, will take place here in this room. And then soon after that, Monday, May 9th, we will meet here again at 6:30 to review the district goals accomplished during the 2024-2025 school year. Okay, any questions about calendar? All right, we're good there. Now, may I please have a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of an employee for a conference with the board's attorney concerning pending, and for a conference with the board's attorney concerning pending or imminent court action.
So moved.
Second.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
motion carries. Thank you all.